If each of us show leadership in our lives, in whatever area that we are passionate about or want to take a stand about or have a voice in, then I think the world will look quite different, and we just need the opportunity to step into that.
Welcome to a new season of Leadership Live podcast, where talented people become extraordinary leaders. I'm Daphna Horowitz, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and talk about real leadership issues. Down to earth, solid, caring and confident leadership. No theory, no pie in the sky, no frills or fluff. Because this is what the world needs most right now. For you to lead with confidence, clarity and impact, so that you can build a business that builds people, grows profit and makes a difference. In this episode, the tables are turned. Marc Marling, who is the podcast host of the podcast Corporate Thought, a self-proclaimed serial connector, had a fabulous idea, and that was to do a podcast episode swap. So last time he appeared on my podcast last week in the episode that dropped, he was being coached live by me on my podcast, and today he is interviewing me for the podcast, and we've both shared both episodes on our podcast. So we are in for a different kind of episode today, where I am being interviewed by Marc. We had lots of fun in this conversation, so go ahead, have a listen, learn a little bit more about me and my story, and as always, for great leadership resources, head on to my website at daphnahorowitz.com or grab yourself a copy of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders, available on Amazon. And this book is specifically aimed at leaders, recently promoted CEOs who really would like to up-level their leadership habits so that they can be extraordinary leaders with thriving teams and really achieve the results that you want to see in your business. So in the meantime, enjoy this episode and let me know, what do you think?
Here we are. And so my audience has gotten to know you a little bit, at least for what you do, though you know I am not a fan of starting any conversation. So what do you do? This is perfect. They already have an inkling.
Exactly.
But I want to know more about, who you are. And then we'll figure out how you got into what you're doing today. But if you will help us out a little bit, maybe we'll start and just talk about something that's going on in life, but it's COVID seems to be coming back. And I don't want this to be a conversation about COVID, but I'm curious what you're doing. And maybe I think you always see your clients online. So I think you already had told me your business hasn't changed because of COVID, but maybe what else has changed? What's going on for you differently that you're doing this year? Are you binge watching something? Have you and Netflix become good friends?
Yes, absolutely. I would be lying if I had to say no, definitely not. So maybe it is a good point to start the conversation, because this year has been incredibly challenging. So while I have always worked a lot online, that has definitely increased because I would see my local clients face to face, and I would travel to see clients either one-on-one for a VIP day or to run workshops, with their the leadership teams in organizations. So there was more variety, and now I'm finding that I am sitting in front of a screen for a lot of the day, which is different for me. And not so easy, I have to say. So maybe even a bit of a follow-on from our conversation last time is that I like the variety. I do like to meet people face to face, and sometimes I call my office my cave, because I can be in this office behind the computer screen the whole day, and that's my interaction, that's my work. So that is definitely one of the changes. Another change is for sure the ups and downs of business, which has been very unpredictable. So definitely some highs and high energy moments, and then some lows, low energy moments where Netflix becomes your best friend, and you just dive in and enjoy. So I've actually just finished The Queen's Gambit, and I thought it was awesome. I don't know if you watched it.
I was watching it with my daughters, and I think I started the first episode, and what often happens to me is I fall asleep on the couch watching something.
So did that happen to you?
No, I need to go back to that one. They said it's good. I need to go back and rewatch it. So then we can. I try to find shows every once in a while that I can watch with them. And so that was one that we said we were going to watch together, but didn't happen so far.
Yeah. So there was, I don't know if you saw, but there was a thing going around on social media about how Netflix has such an impact beyond any marketing exercise, because now the purchase of chess sets and the interest or the Googling of how to play chess and all of that has now skyrocketed beyond anything that anyone could have done with adverts and regular channels. So I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I did hear that, in fact, that chess sets are one of the hot holiday season items this year or something. I mean, it's big for sure. Yeah. Very interesting.
So here's an interesting fact. Because I come from my original career was very mathematically and scientifically orientated. So I was an actuary. I don't know if we mentioned it in the last conversation.
No, I want to get into that. So you are. So you're. This is funny. You are. Let's see. One, two. Maybe the third guest on my show who has mentioned actuaries.
Really?
Yes, which is really a little
unusual.
Yeah, but I do think that you are the first one who has told me that they have actually pursued a career in it. I had a dentist who told me that he was either going to be a dentist or an actuary, and how he studied to be an actuary before he changed modes and became a dentist. And then I had a mathematician who came on and talked at length about actuaries and how he applies things of that in what he does. But you're my first actuary. Although you're not.
I love being the first. Yeah, I don't work as an actuary anymore. Okay. But I work very hard for the qualification, so I still put it there. It is, I am a fully qualified, trained, and have worked as an actuary.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So you're a coach today, and I think everyone's got that down. So we'll talk about that later. But so you were an actuary, so very different, it seems to me. But tell me how that came about. Was that was that something that you wanted to pursue early, or you just found your way there? Tell me.
So yeah, I think that's a good story as well, because I am from early childhood. I think I just loved asking questions, getting to the root cause of issues. Problem solving was very much my thing. And then being a woman, growing up still in a world where my parents were incredibly egalitarian in terms of offering equal opportunities. I've got a brother and a sister, and we were all treated the same. We had academic potential, so they really pushed us to achieve to the best of our ability. And being a woman in a world that was not quite as open as it is today, and there's still a way to go, I love taking on any challenge. That if someone would pose me with a challenge of, you can't do this because you're a girl, or you can't do this because you're a woman, I would go, well, that's what I'm going to do. So coupled with an absolute love for maths and problem solving, it seemed like a great fit. Started to look around. It was a very little known profession at the time, certainly not for women. I started to ask around, and when it was time to choose a career, with my love of maths, I wanted to speak to actuaries, and I spoke to a few male actuaries in South Africa at the time, and they all said to me, listen, you're a woman, it's not for you, you're going to get married, you're going to have children, it's too hard, the road is very hard, there are a lot of exams you've got to get through, it's very challenging, so go look for something else. And having that statement was all I needed to hear to go, well, I'm going to do it. And when I was studying at university, I was kind of one of 5 in my class at the time. And when I qualified, I was one of 5 women actuaries in South Africa at the time. And they were probably quite a small profession anyway. But at that time, maybe 120 to 150 actuaries, and we were only 5 women. So that was a really, a feather in my cap, something I was very proud of having achieved. And I was going to say, connecting to the Queen's Gambit, that because I have a mathematical brain, people always assume that I love playing chess, and I actually really do not like playing chess, and the Queen's Gambit didn't churn up any juices in that way at all. So.
But you actually, but you at the same time did learn to play chess. I mean,
I did learn to play chess.
You know it, so okay. So, is that something that actuaries and chess have to go hand in hand?
I don't know. I think it's kind of something that people associate, with, maybe people who have that way of thinking, mathematically inclined or a logical reasoning type of approach. But I'll tell you what I've always found that worked for me, and why I enjoyed actuarial science in terms of the studies so much, is that it's a very logical kind of field. So if I understood why a certain problem was in place, I could also really very quickly get to a solution for it. And I understood all the processes and formulae and mechanisms and models that we create as actuaries. For me, chess was much more, when you had to get to a higher level of playing chess, it was less about fun and game and figuring it out. It was more about learning the different openings and learning the different things. And that, for me, I was never, ever good at learning things off by heart, and it never appealed to me. So that's where I suppose I departed from the, that way of thinking and playing.
Okay. So you worked as an actuary for an insurance company. So for anyone who doesn't actually know, I guess I should say, so again, you're not the first person to mention actuaries in the show, but new audience, who knows? So actuaries they go out and they assess essentially what probabilities are, and usually for the purposes of insurance companies to decide what the rate that they should charge based on the probability that whatever is being insured will or will not happen.
Exactly. I think it's fair, and you could take it a step further to say that actuaries look at predicting future trends and future behaviors based on analysis of past risk profiles, probabilities, and all of that. So it really is, there's a lot of analysis in terms of unknowns and what does our past tell us about the future? How do we model that? What does it look like? So it's quite a complex field which really relates to modeling kind of future trends. And I think that's why it is exciting. There is something exciting about that, and it did attract me. And I always make the connection that, just as we don't know what's going to happen in future when it comes to numbers, disasters, lifetime, illness, whatever it is, same thing with human behavior. And I decided to go the human behavior route rather than the pricing, modeling, reserving route, which is the actuarial science. So that was my move. I wanted to analyze human behavior and problem solve on that plane.
So how long did you work in that field?
So I worked in that field it was in different ways. So I did move around a little bit. I worked in corporate organizations for 4 years. I did, make my way up quite quickly to director level at a consulting firm which specialized in healthcare services. So for me, I really think there was a theme of always going back to people and what can we do to help people, because I went into the healthcare field, which was really about how do we design healthcare products that really help people get what they need when they are ill. And then I decided I needed more of the people element. So I went into academia and I lectured in actuarial science and statistics for about 7 years. In that time, I also did some consulting work on the side in my own business. And then from there, I decided that I wanted a career change completely, because I felt that there was a gap in the leadership of organizations and in academia, same thing, where people were always driven to push people to get results, but forgetting that element of how do we really focus on people and develop them? How do we look at ourselves and our own behaviors and really become the leaders that we can be in order to get those results that we want to get? And what I find is that with experts, the focus is often on what do I know, how do I do it better, and how do I get the maximal results? And they forget about that personal development element or that leadership element, which I'm passionate about. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to change direction and make a difference in the leadership place, because I always felt that was missing when I was working in the corporate environment.
Oh no, that's great. Do you use the actuarial education at all in what you do today? Do you find that it's helpful or not at all?
I do think that it was helpful for me, and I don't know what came first, if it was my thinking or the actuarial training, or maybe it's a combination, but I really think that my way of thinking, my way of analyzing, my way of being able to look to the future and connect the dots is definitely something that I learned through being an actuary, because there's a big element of that in being an actuary. Like I said, I apply it now to people, and where do you want to be, and what kind of a leader do you want to be, and what results do you want to get, and look at who you are, and try and determine kind of where you want to go from that space. So kind of using that way of thinking, problem solving, analysis, but applying it to people rather than numbers.
Now this gets to where the heart of one of the things I'm always interested in, which is you have a good career. You're well, right? You've got a consultancy on the side. I don't know if you're still working in a corporate setting at that point, but let's fairly say things are going well for Daphna.
Yes, very well, very well.
And then you decide to blow the whole thing up because there is something lacking in a connection.
Yeah.
So there was some intention to your thought process at that point.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
So there was an intention of changing direction of career, making sure that it's something that's more to do with people and meaning and purpose. And and that was the level of intentionality.
And then you opened yourself up to opportunity.
Exactly. And saying yes, speaking to people, finding out more, all of those things. I think today it's so much easier because we've got the internet. I didn't even really have internet at that time. It was all very, very new. This was 15 years ago. So I think definitely I remember for sure we had emails and that, but we didn't use internet the way that we use it today. There definitely wasn't social media in the way that someone mentions something and you can just, you start the whole surfing story. So it was more about speaking to people and getting ideas and input, and we had these info evenings for different things. So just following that route, following that path.
And you also said about saying yes. Is that something that you do? Do you say yes to new opportunities or new challenges?
Yes.
As a regular thing?
Yes. I definitely do. Yes, I'm a big yes person, which I think over the last few years, I think when you're building up your business, you actually have to start saying a lot more no. Much easier for me to say yes than no. But when a challenge comes up, when a new, interesting, exciting opportunity comes up, I say yes to it. That was another example was climbing Kilimanjaro, which I did, I think that was about 7-8 years ago. And that was also just something an idea that came up, and I said, well, if that's happening, I'm going. I'm part of the team. So definitely anything that's a challenge and an interesting opportunity, I will say yes to it.
Hang on, you can't dismiss climbing Kilimanjaro in three sentences. Sorry, but you can't. So, what and why and how and Give us a little backstory to that one.
A little backstory. Okay, firstly, understand, right? I've explained already. I was an actuary. I'm a maths nerd. I was never sporty, and that was climbing mountains was certainly not ever part of my life plan, right? But I was sitting with a client one day who said to me, one of his dreams is to climb Kilimanjaro. And I said, climb Kilimanjaro? How is that possible? Don't you have to be like a mountain climber and have all this skills and stuff? And he said, no, actually Kilimanjaro is the one mountain that you can climb without mountaineering skills. It's a strenuous hike. It's tough, but you don't need ropes and all of that. So I thought, the minute someone says this is like a challenge that I could take on, well then I'm interested. And the seed was planted. And a couple of years later, I was advising actually for a non-profit organization on their strategy, and they were looking at some fundraising ideas. And I kind of said, well, what about doing something really radical like climbing Kilimanjaro? So the woman who was the head of that division said, yes, let's do it. So I said, well, if you're doing it, I'm joining the team who's climbing. And that's how that happened. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was really, really, really tough. But very, very worth it.
So you don't have to be a mountaineer. You don't have to have rope climbing experiences. But
technical. You don't need technical experience, yeah.
But you have to train. You trained for it.
Yes, definitely trained for it. That's when again, being a completely non-sporty person, never really sticking to any kind of exercise routine. That's when I started running. And since then, I've even run a half marathon so far. So I can definitely, and you've seen my medals as you
Gotcha.
But yes, you do have to train for it.
We've talked about
that.
So just the way you reframed it. No, yes. I didn't pick up and move my business. I expanded my business. I became global. I didn't go from being a South African business to an Israeli business.
Exactly. And that made all the difference, because it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing to have built up a business in a certain place, and you've got I had a great reputation. I was known. I was making my mark, and then all of a sudden having to leave and go somewhere else and start from zero because you're just an unknown in the new place. That's scary enough. But if you see it as that way, stopping one thing and starting something else, to me it was actually too difficult to contemplate. And so with that reframe, it was like, hey, I'm just expanding. I'm not stopping anything. I'm actually just getting bigger.
Yep.
Which was exciting at that point,
So you touched on the fact that you have 3 kids. Your kids were born while you still, your last child is born right when this whole thing then develops thereafter.
Right.
How have you found the dual role of being a parent and building your empire?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's something that is very present in my life, and I think many people's lives, always. So I think for me, the value around career and the value around family have always been 2 very, very strong values. And it's always about how do you manage both, because they're both important to me. I think it was clear to me always that family comes first, but that there's a rhythm to it. So when I talk about balance and work-life balance, I actually talk about rhythm a lot more than balance. Because when you think about balance, it feels like everything has to be balanced out at the same time and more or less equal, and kind of try and take from something to put somewhere else. And that just doesn't feel very flowing to me. But when I think about rhythm, I think about sometimes your career demands more of you and you're going to have to put more time there. And sometimes your family demands more of you and you need to put your time and energy there. So if you go with the rhythm of it and try and work out where the rhythm is the most balanced, then but at least for me, that's what worked for me, to think about it more like that. And yes, there were times when my career took up a lot more time and energy and times that my family did. And it's just about being aware of that. What is the right thing for that time and that place? And yes, there were things I needed to give up on in terms of career because my family needed me, my kids were small, whatever it was. And sometimes the other way around, and that's okay. But I feel that it's something that I'm conscious about all the time. And it seems to have worked out well because, both are important to me. And I've just done my best to make sure that I've been able to be in that rhythm.
And I want to be fair, because maybe it is giving up something. You said, you have to give up something for the balance, but you make choices. But our choices necessarily, at some level, we all want to have it all and to eat our cake too, and we often can't. But that's also because there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many places. Maybe you'd like to spend your life climbing mountains now that you've climbed Kilimanjaro.
Definitely not. Been there, got the t-shirt. Thank you very much. Moving right along.
But you get my point, right?
Yeah, I get your point.
So how you frame those decisions, and maybe about how you. And I'm curious because you're a very smart person, and I appreciate your insight to things. So when you make those choices, when you're looking for the balance, what does that analysis look like? Like, okay, if I don't, my child is going to have a recital and I don't want to miss that. But if I don't go to the recital, then I have the opportunity to meet this person who I might not otherwise ever get a chance to meet. That's a real simple example.
100%, right? And it happens over and over, you know.
Sure. And you can probably find examples that have a lot of zeros attached to them and other things. But how do you do that analysis?
Exactly. So I think it's such a good question, even putting it in that nuts and bolts of when you need to make one choice against another. And I really think that's where I'm saying that rhythm comes in, because in some cases you will choose the meeting over the recital, and in other cases you will choose the recital over the meeting. And for me, it comes down to a few things. And the key things that come to mind is, number one, being very strong within yourself. So knowing at your core what's important for you right now, what's important for your family, what would be the right decision or the right choice at this point in time. Another thing that I think is really important is maybe just a sense of faith and belief, both in yourself and in the universe, or whatever it is that you want to call it, that if an opportunity is meant to be, it will come in some way or another. So if you've decided in that moment to go to the recital and missed out on a big business opportunity, something else will come, because you believe 100% in your own ability, in what you're doing, and why you're making the decision that you're making. And the third thing is having a very good support system. So whatever that looks like for you. For me, it was my husband, who is just incredible. So we've always been partners in this journey of life, career, and parenting. And if I couldn't be there for something, he would often be there, and vice versa. So we really shared that out quite well in terms of family responsibilities, being there for the children and taking on the roles equally. So really being in partnership in terms of that.
That's good, and that's important. I do think that becomes, for a lot of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs out there, these are some of the struggles they have, right? How do I do it all? How do I balance it all? You hear that time and time again, and you hear them, and it may be that often the brunt of those family raising decisions are still, unfortunately, somewhat on the woman more so. Although there's no good reason for that, right? But I think it does occur on both sides of those for the decision making, whether the person is the entrepreneur, if you will, is a man or a woman in any given case. They're still a parent, right?
Yeah, so, yeah. And I've always, I just feel very blessed in this way, in that my husband and I have always been in partnership over this. And I remember also reading somewhere once that, the approach is, when the husband does something that's got to do with the children, it's like, oh, that's amazing. So your husband really helps out. And then you go, but hold on a sec, are they not his kids too? Like, what is this, him helping me? Seriously? Are we not in this together? Are you kidding?
Very true.
So for us, it was never like that. It wasn't him helping me. It's actually, here we have a week of crazy career schedule, some children activities. How do we manage it? Let's split our time. Let's see where we each come in and do what we need to do. Right.
No, and trying to do it all. So let's talk about your coaching for a moment, because we've talked around it. But what is the type of coaching and that you do, and that you lead an organization of people who do?
If I look at me, my coaching, when I take on a coaching client, I'm a CEO coach. So I will coach CEOs to be the leaders that they need to be in order to lead themselves, their people, and their business to whatever level of success that they want to be at. And that is the whole picture, because it starts with looking at who you are. It continues with understanding that to get what you want to get out of your business, you really need to understand that it's about the people that you're employing and leading. And then finally, of course, to know where you want the business to go and how you want to get there. Then if we look at the CEO, we've got the supporting or the pipeline of leaders and talent and high potential people under him or her who are going to help support that CEO in what they need to do and lead the business into the future. So my team of coaches come in there. We take the high potential, talented individuals who are in the organization and seen as future leaders, and we create that support system for the whole business to really be a sustainable business into the future. And that's what my passion is, because business is about people at the end of the day. And if you're really going to know how to lead yourself and lead your people in the right way, you're going to create a sustainable business. That's the focus of my company and, where I get involved myself.
Gotcha. And has the business morphed into, I'm starting at the end that you've defined what you are today, but has that always been the coaching business, or did it develop into that?
Definitely developed into that. So I think, for a long time, I was a solopreneur who kind of did all the work myself and, built it up. But I think that you need to go through that process to understand where you want to be eventually and what role you want to play and where you want to grow yourself and your business into. So, so it's been an evolving journey.
And how many years now? 15?
15 years.
That's amazing. For people who are thinking about getting out there and maybe either starting their own business, and maybe they're not ready for a coach, or maybe they are in coaching, but is there a book or a resource that you tend to tell them to go and pay attention to or to read? Do you say, hey, before you start, read this one first?
I'm such a big reader, and for me, it tends to be much more individualized. So when I meet someone and I say, I understand more about where they're at and where they want to go, there's like so many books out there that are excellent. So I tend to be more kind of, customized or individualized in my book recommendations. But there are a few that I think are just incredible. I mean, one that I do recommend is the 2 books by Simon Sinek, who I absolutely love, Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last, both excellent books. A profound classic for anybody who's looking to do some self-development work and self-awareness work is Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul, which is absolutely amazing. And then, of course, for developing good, strong leadership habits is my newly launched book. Got to give that a plug.
I honestly had no idea you had a book. Okay.
2. I've got 2 books.
Tell us about both of them.
So the first one is called Courage to Lead. And that one I wrote after I climbed Kilimanjaro, because that whole experience was such a life-changing, profound experience for me, and a tough experience, and I saw the leadership metaphors all along the way. So Courage to Lead is about my climb, stories of my climb, which I include with leadership lessons. So that whole metaphor of climbing the mountain and being a leader. And the second book, which I've just recently launched a couple of months ago, and the Kindle version is coming out in January, is Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. And that is really about understanding 3 things about leadership. One is that leadership is a verb. It's about what you do and how you show up. Okay? 2 is that leadership is a habit. Just doing consistent, simple, regular things can help you develop your leadership skills over time. And 3 is that leadership is for everybody. I don't believe in associating leadership with a title or having to be at the top of some big organization. You are a leader, whether you are the CEO or not, whether you are a mom, a stay-at-home mom, or whether you are, whatever it is that you're doing, there are areas in your life where you are a leader and you can always show leadership. And that's really important, because if each of us show leadership in our lives, in whatever area that we are passionate about or want to take a stand about or have a voice in, then I think the world will look quite different, and we just need the opportunity to step into that. So that's what my second book is about.
And you said the Kindle version comes out in January, which will probably tie nicely to when this episode is released. So
yay!
And you've added to my own now bookshelf of new things to read.
Thank you.
So you're a big reader. What are you reading now?
I've got a few books that are out and open at the moment. Always a few books at once. What have I got at the moment? I'm reading actually Ask and It Is Given, which is maybe a little bit controversial for some of the listeners. It's a law of attraction book by Esther and Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you've heard about them.
Nope.
But really, really good read, actually. And it is about the power of intention. So how you put stuff out and what the world or the universe brings back to you. Just finished the book Factfulness by Hans Rosling, which is phenomenal. And for the period that we're going through now, it really is about, are we really listening to the data? Are we really looking at the data when we make decisions? Because he shows in this book 10 biases that people tend to have in terms of when they interpret certain things that are happening in the world. And Hans Rosling actually died a few years back. And I'm just, firstly love the book, but also I wish he was around to just give us his commentary in terms of this pandemic that we're going through at the moment. So that one I've just finished. And I've just started a new book that was recommended to me. It's a fiction book by Stephen Fry. And I'll see how that one goes. So, yeah, so that's what I'm reading.
Do you balance the fiction and the nonfiction?
So, yeah, I do. Fiction for me is a break just to clear my mind. Nonfiction is just for my development always. So I like to have a fiction book every so often. What tends to happen is if I'm starting a fiction book, then I'll tend to kind of be completely immersed in it and usually can't put it down. So I have to balance those out a little bit. That's like a treat.
No, I get that. That's the binge watching.
Yeah, exactly. The binge watching, exactly. The binge reading.
Yeah.
What are you reading, Mark?
Oh, what am I reading? I just finished, and I talk in social media posts about what reading at any given time. So we just finished Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Okay.
Who is a Navy SEAL who had a really horrific, or he wasn't a Navy SEAL, it was a horrific childhood. But he is a unstoppable force in and of himself, and a very interesting read for sure. I think he may harness his anger a little bit, and I'm not sure he shouldn't find better ways to let some of it go. But that's perhaps just my interpretation of things. But certainly a very impressive specimen of a person who does not take on a challenge he doesn't complete, no matter how extreme the challenge may be. And that's very, very interesting. And then I just read a very old, I tend to go back and read sort of the old classics, if you will. And there was a book that I had heard was the book that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett bonded over, called Business Adventures. And it was, I think, it's a series of New Yorker articles from the 1960s that were put into a book about cautionary tales of business in the 1950s and 1960s.
Nice.
But it was the book that the two of them bonded over. And I said, hey, that's a good, recommendation in and of itself. And so I just finished that, and I'm about to reread a book. Did you ever hear of a book called Delivering Happiness?
Oh, of course. Oh, my gosh.
And I felt that because Tony Hsieh died a couple of weeks ago, I should pull that one out and read it.
Yeah, that's also one of my favorites.
And then Oh, is it?
Yeah, and also just very sad about Tony Hsieh and the story, that firstly that he died and how he came to the end of his life. A little bit sad, but I still think he's an icon in terms of really being able to connect that absolute success from a, bottom line point of view with building a company and a culture that people want to work for, and that's very values based. And I think that's the legacy he's left for us in this world.
Oh, I think absolutely. That's very true. Yeah, I too find my way from time to time into fiction, and then I can't put it down. But I have to. And there's a stack of fiction that I haven't gotten to. So I tend to read books. Yes, as you said, sometimes for pleasure, but I also read fiction, especially in two ways. I pick, I guess what I'd call easy fiction, the junk novel, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Like the true binge watching thing. And then I'll pick books by what I would call, for me at least, difficult authors. Books that A, can make you think, but B, you might need to have a dictionary by your side because the words are chosen with such intentionality in the words that were chosen in the book but and that doesn't as often happen in business books. It does. I actually was thinking about you and Actuary, and the first thing I thought of when I thought of it is Nassim Taleb.
Oh, okay.
Because
yes.
I think he was an actuary first.
Lovely.
I believe he was. So, he the guy who wrote the Black Swan. But I think I believe he was an actuary. I don't know why that's in my head that way. And so, but I was like, that was a book that took me some time that I had to really think through.
Yes.
It's like I also really enjoy books like, and you probably have read Yuval Harari.
Yes.
Sapiens and those books.
Yes, yeah.
They're books those are books that actually make you think a little bit.
Exactly. And they take long to read. I actually I do listen to books as well, especially when I'm running. And I tried to listen to his book, or Sapiens was the one. But I realized there are some books you can't listen to. You actually have to read the book and have it in front of you and kind of see the words as you're reading them. So.
Gotcha. So actually, Can't Hurt Me, I read or I was reading, and then Kisha, who was doing my 31 Minutes podcast with me, told me she was listening to it, and it was different because what he did was he had a ghostwriter who had worked with him and who was reading the book, but then they would break away from the book and it would go more towards like a podcast where they would talk about the last chapter.
I love that.
So if you're looking for something, it's I thought it was a bit like Malcolm Gladwell's the audio version of Talking with Strangers. He didn't exactly just put the book out there. He put the book out there enhanced with more things than the audio version.
That's awesome. I love that. I think that's such a great idea, actually. I think it's wonderful.
So that might give you a couple of audio ones to check out.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love that.
Anyway, so Daphna, if people want to know more about you, how can they find you?
Thank you. Well, the main place is my website, daphnahorovitz.com. And then, of course, on social media, I'm active on LinkedIn mainly. So feel free to connect through my website. Always happy to hear from listeners. And if anybody has any questions, or conversation is my thing. I say conversation is the tool of leadership. So anyone who's up for a conversation, also on my podcast, check that out. Very happy to be part of that.
Excellent. Thank you. And so I should close by going back to where we started and ask you, so now, did I make that conversation deeper and more personal?
You know that as a coach, I'm going to turn that around on you and say, well, what do you think? What do you think? And then I promise I'll give you my answer as well.
Yes. It's the same reason why I didn't know that I didn't do my research purposefully. I didn't find out that you had written these books. Something I may have traditionally done, but that would formulate our conversation more. And I want the conversations to come out more. Like if I met you for the first time at, some event or something. And so I think I got to know Daphna a whole lot more. And that was the purpose of what we were doing.
And thank you. And I think we definitely did touch on some deeper elements of who Daphna is. So I appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you. And please come back anytime on the show.
Thank you, Mark. Wonderful. Wonderful to connect with you always.
This wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's continue the conversation. Do you have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Connect with me on LinkedIn or head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download a free sample of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. So tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.